Today we have on Soundarya. She did her undergrad from India, from NIT Trichy, did her master's at Columbia, did a 3-year stint at Salesforce as a product manager. I would say she's a writer at heart. Admitted is one of her first books and she co-authored Unshackled.
I think the best when I'm writing on paper. If I feel like I'm not able to figure out a certain problem, the first thing I do is open my journal and start writing whatever comes to mind.
I was trying to look back at 2023 and be like, hey, what all did I do? Right? And I can only remember the key moments or stuff that really stood out or memories that really stuck.
I've tried voice journaling over the years in different forms. I have been using Audio Pen, just another voice to text journaling app. It's worked incredibly well because it summarizes my very unclear thoughts when I'm speaking into the phone into this beautifully clear text. There is a joke amongst a lot of writers that most books can be a blog post because the lesson in there is not that profound for it to be a book. When I got a message from my lawyer on WhatsApp saying, I'm so sorry, Soundarya, but they denied it. Back then, if you'd asked me, do you want the O1 visa or do you want $1 million? I would have chosen the O1 visa. I was that obsessed with the idea of getting the O1 because it meant freedom for me. A sort of validation that I can do what I want in this country, when I want, where I want, however I want. Sometimes you keep your sights on a certain goal for so long that you forget the initial reason you wanted the goal. America was not this magical destination where I wanted to settle down anymore. Now I think of America as some way a product. They've marketed the country so well and so many people want to come there.
Welcome to Funds and Founders. This weekly show is tailored for Austin founders navigating the early stages of their entrepreneurial journey. I'm your host and fellow Austinite, Abhinav Sinha. If you're looking for the motivation and the insight needed to build a successful company, you're in the right place. Today we have on Soundarya. She did her undergrad from India, from NIT Trichy, did her master's at Columbia, did a 3-year stint at Salesforce as a product manager. I would say she's a writer at heart, has a blog she's been running for the past couple of years called Curious Maverick, 2-time author. Admitted is one of her first books and she co-authored Unshackled, which demystifies the legal immigration system for high-skilled immigrants. You were in the States since 2017, went back to India for a year, came back on O1A, which is a very prestigious visa that we'll talk about as well. And you started Unshackled.club roughly a year and a half ago, which is an online membership community to help talented immigrants secure a visa. Welcome to the show, Soundarya.
Thanks so much for having me, and what a fantastically concise intro. Love it.
I forgot to mention, has a newsletter and a decent following on LinkedIn as well, which is where I first came across your content.
Right. The only thing is the Curious Maverick, by the way, that's been there for 2 years. But really, I began the blog in 2014, about 10 years ago. It's just changed the name from, I think back then it was Balasubramani.wordpress.com. And then it went through 3 different websites.
Nice.
Now it's Curious Maverick. But it's 10 years worth of blogs there.
Nice. One thing I wanted to start with was, how did you get into writing and why writing?
I was part of several clubs at NIT Trichy. Anyone who doesn't know about NIT Trichy, the one thing that they should know is it is spoiled with clubs.
Okay.
There is a club for everything. There was a club for free thought. It was called the Cognito Club, the free thought group of NIT Trichy, where we would sit around and talk about atheism and morality and God.
Interesting.
So I grew up in a suburb and spent 13 years there. So I didn't really have a lot of exposure to extracurricular activities. So when I got into NIT, I joined any and every club that interested me. I happened to join a few writing clubs. It wasn't because I thought I want to be an author someday, so let's join this. It was just a sense of, okay, let's give it a shot. So I joined one fiction club called the Fishbowl Network. I joined a few other non-fiction writing clubs. And so that was the starting. That was the spark. And since then, it's taken off in very interesting ways. But I used to write fiction a lot in college.
How important would you say writing has been both throughout your professional career as an individual and also now being a founder and a first-time founder? How do you think that impacts or aids anything and everything you're working on?
I think the writing that I publish out into the world is a tip of the iceberg of the number of words I've written that's unpublished in my Rome research workspace, in other notes that I've taken over the years. I can't imagine life without writing every single day right now. And the funny thing is, all of us are writers. You wrote for this podcast. We write emails and business proposals every day. So when someone comes and tells me, how do I start writing? I tell them, you have already been doing it your entire life, adult life. The only difference is, I think for me, writing has impacted, obviously in the form of publishing articles and books, but beyond that, in terms of clarifying my thinking on anything. I think the best when I'm writing on paper. So if I feel like I'm not able to figure out a certain problem, the first thing I do is open my journal and start writing whatever comes to mind and vomiting all of that out there so I can make sense of it. Yeah. And so I think, to answer your question of how has it helped, one is obviously that it is a product that I've produced over the years that's been consumed by people. But beyond that, it's been an incredibly helpful tool for clarity of thinking and for therapy. Going through a tough time, one of my coping mechanisms is to journal what's happening, and it's always helped me calm down.
That's nice. I've recently been toying with the idea of starting like a daily, some sort of blog. And the idea is more, I forget a lot of the things I do. And there's a lot of things that don't stick with me and like you won't remember. And I want to just start by, hey, here's everything I did today. Not like super in-depth, but more just I want to start writing about what the day was, who I met, interesting conversations we've had. Because sometimes there's some really interesting conversations that I'd forget out of nowhere.
Absolutely.
The biggest problem is with the amount of content out there, social media, everything, I've started trying to optimize how to start versus just starting and writing. And like, it's one of that like analysis paralysis thing. Like, I know it doesn't matter. I should just start writing, even if it's just in a journal. I prefer the pen and paper, like you said. And this takes a lot more time to do with pen and paper than just doing a notes and a simple typed up notes. I think it's a mental block more than anything else, but I've heard from a lot of people who started writing that they've been able to focus a lot more, be a lot more calm, composed, and sort of get their thoughts out. So
you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? Just to capture the interesting thoughts that you have every day?
Just recollection for myself as well, right? Because like I was trying to look back at 2023 and be like, hey, what all did I do?
Yeah.
Right? And I can only remember the key moments or stuff that really stood out or memories that really stuck. I know for a fact I've done a lot more than I'm able to recall. And the initial reason is just for me to be able to look back and bring out the positives of everything that's happened over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever.
I feel compelled to suggest this.
Yeah.
You don't have to do this, but just giving you an idea. I've tried voice journaling over the years in different forms. Before, I would just take my voice recorder out and start speaking into it. And that's it. I wouldn't do anything beyond that. But these days, we have AI.
Yeah.
And so I have been using Audio Pen, just another voice-to-text journaling app. But it's worked incredibly well because it summarizes my very unclear thoughts when I'm speaking into the phone into this beautifully clear text. And then all I have to do is copy and paste that into my room research. It's a lot harder to sit down and write, a lot easier to just walk and talk.
Yeah.
So have you tried that?
No, I haven't tried that yet. It's been suggested once or twice. Just haven't started, but I'll probably make today the day I start. So you did the whole come to the US, do masters, get H1B, get a job. What pushed you towards quitting your job and taking that leap of faith? And were there any, I don't want to scare scared emotions, but sort of sense of security emotions that you had to deal with at that point?
Not before I quit. Before I quit, the only thing that stopped me from quitting was immigration. It wasn't fear of quitting, or it wasn't even money, because I had paid off my education loan within the first year of my stint at Salesforce. I didn't have a family to take care of. I didn't have dependents. I still don't have dependents. And so in that case, I was pretty privileged that I could quit without much damage to anyone around me. Within the first month at Salesforce, I knew I wanted to quit. But of course, I stayed for a year to pay off my loan, to get some experience. And the second year at Salesforce, I was working on my first book, Admitted.
Yeah.
So that kind of took away all of my time outside of work. And once I finished and published Admitted, it was clear as water that I have to quit my job because my calling is to be a writer. Maybe not just a writer, but that is one of my callings.
Yeah.
I have to pursue it. The only thing that stopped me was immigration, not having the right visa to work on what I wanted. And so very less insecurity around money before I quit. Easiest decision I've taken ever in my life. But that 6 months after I quit my job, I thought a lot about money. I thought a lot about financial insecurity. And I never regretted the decision. Never, even in those 6 months. Once I remember coming very close to regretting, and that was when I was on a BART in San Francisco, and this was when 3rd month into quitting my job, wasn't making much money or any, and my bank balance was only going down and down and down. You think that you've set aside enough money, but it's never enough. There's always expenses that keep adding up. And so as I was sitting there contemplating, what am I going to do in life? This girl with a Salesforce backpack comes and sits right next to me. And I'm just looking at the backpack and thinking, just in this moment, if I'm in her shoes, I would not be going through this problem.
Yeah.
I'll have other problems, but maybe not this specific one. Once I started working on Unshackled, once I had a sense of this is what I want to do for the next year of my life, I know why I'm doing it, and there is also potential for this to become a business, I stopped worrying about money after that.
Okay. So you mentioned you wrote your first book, Admitted. What's the difference in just writing online on a blog versus a post, a social media post versus writing a book? How does that journey happen? And why decide to write a book? Was there something that sparked that? Was there something you thought needs to be out there? Or what was that journny like?
There is a joke amongst a lot of writers that most books can be a blog post. They did not have to be a book because the lesson in there is not that profound for it to be a book. So with that caveat, I think original ideas rarely come out in social media posts. Maybe a really, really good blog post, I would say so. But for me, a book is, I'm really writing the book for myself before anyone else. In a very selfish way. Yes, it is to create some impact. Yes, it is to help people. But really, it's more of an internal journey that I want to go on for the next year. It feels like you're possessed by something. Recently, I was reading this book, Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. It's an okay book. It's not my favorite novel. But there's a passage in there where the author talks about how, for her, writing this novel, it feels like God came down, touched her head, possessed her with this idea, and now she cannot let go of it until it is out of her in the form of a book. And there is this sense of laser-like focus you feel when you're working on a book. I felt this way both for Admitted and Unshackled. There were a few months in both those writing journeys when I would wake up, I would have no doubt, not even for a second, why I'm doing what I'm doing today. I know exactly what I need to do, and I'm just going to do it. No second guessing, no doubts, and that feeling is, it's like a high. It's the high that you want to keep chasing.
Okay.
Because right now, for example, in my life, I have those questions a lot. I have a lot of doubts around, is this the right thing I should be doing? What am I supposed to do next? I'm not very sure. It feels like I'm stuck in this fog. I don't know what to do. But when you're writing a book, when you're especially into the 2nd or 3rd month of it, that feeling is just intoxicating. To answer your question, I think I write mostly for myself first. Once I feel possessed by this idea that I have to do this. And secondly, I think writing a book versus writing an article, you get to push your limits a lot more for a book because you have to fill at least 100 pages. And there are people, especially if your book has pre-orders, there's people waiting on the other side to read this at some point. And so you've made a promise. The stakes are a lot higher, for me at least. So I crowdfunded my second book. We raised about $50,000, and then I got a grant for another $50,000. I had a lot of accountability through that money, and now I had to do a decent job because people have put their money and time and effort into this.
It's some notion of a fiduciary responsibility at that point, that there is some investment I have to return in some capacity, whether it's in the book or a delivered book or whatever.
Exactly. Except it's not stressful, at least it wasn't for me, because it's the opposite of stress that I felt after I raised that money. Because now I realized, holy shit, I get to do what I actually love and I got paid for it right now. There is nothing more I could ask for.
Yeah.
And I remember I was living in Oakland Hills in California, the 1st and 2nd month of working on Unshackled. Beautiful place. And there'd be moments when I would literally, I'd be writing, I would look out the window, there'll be, the fall leaves, And I would sit back and think, how did this happen? Like, how am I getting to work on this book without having to worry about money? And there's at least a few hundred people out there who want to read this. And it took effort to get to that moment. But that moment is what I think a lot of writers chase.
Makes sense. So you mentioned it took a lot of effort. Quickly going to Admitted, you wrote it. What is the journey like to publish something? So what does that journey look like? What did you learn? Because my understanding is, what I'm trying to highlight is, when you get into any sort of foray, building a company, startup entrepreneur, you know what you know, which is I want to write a book and put it out there, but you don't know what it takes to go from, hey, the book is ready, to get it out of market. There's all these nuances, small things that happen. Briefly talk through what the journey of self-publishing was, and why did you decide to crowdfund for the second book, and what was difference in both the launches and everything?
I self-published both of my books, in a way. The second book was published under my company, so it is self-published. Journey of self-publishing. I'll tell you the cons of self-publishing. Sorry, I'll tell you the pros and cons, because I think both are important. Pros, you control the timeline. No one gets to tell you that your book won't be out for 12 months. You have full ownership. You get all the royalty, all the pros. Cons, it is a full-time job. I don't think people should take it lightly. If you're fine with putting your book out there and nobody is going to read it, anyone can do that. Go and do it right now. But if you actually want at least a few thousand people to read your book, it takes a shit ton of marketing. So much marketing and promotion and emails and cold messages. Not fun work. The least favorite part of my job is that. And so people who self-publish should really ask themselves, do they want to take upon themselves that work of promotion and marketing and logistics? I had to figure out international logistics because my books were printed in Coimbatore, India, and I had to ship them to Los Angeles, California. So how do you figure out import-export? And I made mistakes and I lost $1,500 because of a very, very simple mistake. And so that entire process was incredibly stressful because you have this huge shipping container that brought all of your books, but now you don't know how to get them from the ship to your warehouse. And then the truck that you call, they pick up the books, they go to the warehouse, but they don't know where to drop them off. There's all these little things that come up. Yeah. And I would urge anyone who's listening to this who wants to self-publish, get someone else who can do that for you and pay them. I would not do it again. For my third book, I am not going to take care of any of these logistics because I think it's just not a good use of my time.
100%. Another
just lesson I learned from, especially Unshackled, is editing. For Admitted, I didn't have an editor, a professional editor. I had a friend of mine who was very good at editing, still not a professional editor, edit the book and try to find mistakes. And I had a few proofreaders, and that was it. For Unshackled, since we'd raised some money, my mentor Rajesh said, you cannot cheap out on editing. And so I went ahead and hired a professional editor, Anayak Alcasas. I'll be honest, when she first quoted the cost, it seemed quite high to me because I'd never paid for this before.
And no frame of reference.
So I told Rajesh, why do I need to spend this much money? I can get 3 friends to edit. And he pushed me. He said, no, I want you to listen to me on this. Get Anayak. She's edited books of people like Seth Godin before and all these other great writers. So you have to, if you want this book to be a timeless one, you have to get a professional editor. So I did. Best decision ever. I spent about 2 months with Anayak every single day. And it's very hard to describe in like one sentence what she did. She took this 120,000 word messy manuscript and turned that into an 90,000 word professional grade book. It wasn't just catching errors and typos. Obviously, that's important. And it pisses me off when there's still a typo in there. But more so, it's like she took a step back and looked at the structural integrity of the whole book and made sure that if we talked about a certain concept in chapter A, we don't repeat that in chapter D, and that we build on top of it. So that like entire thread of weaving from chapter 1 to chapter 15, no one could have done who hadn't been trained in this.
Yeah.
So please get, if not a very professional editor, someone who knows what they're doing and spend some money on that.
Can you roughly say price range of how much that costs?
Surely. It cost me $8,000. But my book was over 100,000 words. Not many books are over those many words. So I would say if your book is, say, 50,000 words, which is average, you should set aside $3,000 to $4,000 at least.
Cool. What did you learn in that process? So working with the professional editor, did it highlight anything where you were like, oh, I never knew that I'm supposed to keep track of this while writing or understand, or was it more just a process?
I didn't know this would help, but it actually did. What Anayak did was she created a Google sheet, this giant Google sheet with all of the chapters, all of the headings in each of the chapters, the subheadings in each of them, the concepts discussed, and put all of this in this giant sheet so we could look at the entire book in one place. And we get to see, have we repeated concepts? Have we unnecessarily explained something 3-4 times? Or was it necessary to explain that 3-4 times? That was incredibly helpful. Like looking at that sheet. Otherwise, I'm just working on one chapter at a time. And I'm working on one sentence at a time. I don't get a chance to look at my entire book in one place like that. That very simple process was incredibly effective for me. I'm sure I journaled the lessons I learned from Anayak in my journal. I wish I had it in front of me right now so I could read off of that. That's one thing that came to mind.
Nice. So you self-published Admitted. You decided to write a second book. At this time, this is the time when, I might be getting timelines incorrect, but you applied for O1B and O1B got RFE denied, and then you had to figure out what you're going to do. Briefly, can you talk about what the O1 visa is?
Sure.
And then we'll go on to your journey from there.
Absolutely. I'll also explain what RFE is because I don't suppose everyone knows. The O1 is a temporary work visa that was introduced in 1990 along with the H1B. Everyone knows the H1B. It is the most popular work visa. So the similarities are they're both temporary. Work visas need employer sponsorship. Difference. O1 is uncapped. There is no lottery system. O1 can be renewed forever technically.
Yeah.
The H1B is limited to 6 years. And the O1 does not have a minimum wage requirement, meaning you don't have to be making X dollars an hour if you're on the O1 in a certain role. And so all of these qualities make the O1 an excellent visa for founders, and especially for, I would say, solo founders like myself. That's brief on the O1. Of course, because of all the advantages, it's not meant for everyone.
Yeah.
The O1 has an incredibly high bar that you have to meet, and you have to show that you've been consistently contributing very significantly to your field for a few years. And so they measure that in the form of 8 criteria, and you have to meet at least 3 out of the 8 criteria. I call them the 8 pillars. And so that's about the O1. I filed my O1B as a writer in education and technology, January 2022. I got the RFE in February 2022, within like 2 weeks. It was disappointing, but I was pretty like, it's okay. RFE, not the end of the world. RFE means request for evidence, which is USCI's or US government's way of saying, we don't think you're there yet. Give us more evidence. And so we spent 3 months gathering more evidence, more screenshots, more emails, and then we resent the whole application April 2022. And then I got the denial notice May 16th, 2022. That was the whole journey.
Yeah. So at this point, you've already quit Salesforce. You're working with a startup. You're working on an idea.
I was on a part-time H1B, working for 5-10 hours with a startup and spending all of my other time working on my idea.
Got it. And so you get the denial. What goes through your mind? How are you making decisions at this point? Because you're sort of in the middle, right? You didn't get what you wanted, but you're also trying to build your company.
I think you remember all the rejections far more than the approvals in your life. And also, I've been talking about this story throughout my entire Unshackled tour that I've been doing. The moment I got the denial, I was in Oakland getting a veggie sandwich from this small deli. I was like literally handing over the money when I got a message from my lawyer on WhatsApp saying, I'm so sorry, Soundarya, but they denied it. Thankfully, I was wearing a mask. So no one saw my immediate tears. I paid the money, took my e-scooter, rushed back home, crawled into bed, and didn't leave for the entire day. Because back then, if you'd asked me, Abhinav, like, do you want the O1 visa or do you want $1 million? I would have chosen the O1 visa. I was that obsessed with the idea of getting the O1 because it meant freedom for me.
Yeah, 100%.
A sort of validation that I can do what I want in this country, when I want, where I want, however I want. The first day was really hard. Cried a lot. Second day was also pretty hard. I was in bed. Third day, I was completely fine. I woke up, I moved forward, and I decided, okay, this is not the end. I'm going to keep going. And that was in some ways the inception of my book, Unshackled. Not that I had been thinking of a book called Unshackled since December of 2021, like 6 months ago. But I was waiting to get my O1, so I had some authority to write this book.
Yeah.
Clearly that wasn't happening. So I thought, okay, this is not going to happen for another 6 months. What do? I still want to write this book and help immigrants in the country. So that's when I decided I want to work with a lawyer. I want people to take this book seriously.
Yeah, 100%.
And I don't think they'll do that if it's just me.
Yeah.
But obviously, Samir provided a lot more than just authority. Could not have written the book without him.
So you working part-time with a startup, you get denied, you decide to still write the book, move on with your journey. At what point did you make the decision to go back to India? And why did that occur? Because you had part-time H-1B. My understanding is you could have still stayed in the US.
Yeah.
And I don't know how part-time H-1B works.
I guess now we're getting into slight territory of immigration nuances.
Yeah.
My part-time H-1B was with the startup.
Yeah.
So I was only authorized to do work, active work and make money through the startup.
Yeah.
I wanted to work on my book full-time, build a company around it and earn money from that. So when I realized by the end of 2022 that I'm sure of doing this, I want to do this, I even got the grant to do this, I couldn't do that in America. It's very ironic, right? That I was writing a book on the immigration system, which is exactly what pushed me out of the country. There's some joke in there. But even then, December 2022, at some point, I was going back home in my car. I was talking to Rajesh on the phone. And I just told Rajesh, Rajesh, maybe I should go back home. Why am I here? I'm clear of what I want my future to look like. I want to do this. I don't think this is the right place for me anymore. And it was a very split-second decision that I made in that moment. It also happened that my brother was having a kid on January 1st, due date, and I wanted to be there for that. So all of it aligned very well. And I decided to go back to India. I thought I was going back only for a few months, to be honest, just to write the book. I ended up staying for 9 months in the end. Best decision ever. That's how I make the decision of deciding to go back to India. First few weeks in India were incredibly hard. I hadn't set foot in over 3 years when I went back. I hadn't lived with my parents in over 8 years. Properly lived with them. This was, you know how they say 6 degrees of separation, or no, 6 stages of denial or something. This, for me, the stages were deciding to go there, landing in India, feeling incredibly overwhelmed, wanting to go back to America, having minor conflicts with my parents every day on something or the other because we haven't lived together in a while.
100%.
Slowly accepting the fact that I'm here and I need to be here. And then really, really, really finding happiness and peace in being back with my parents, living with them, working on the book there. And finally ending up with realizing that best decision ever that I came back to India. Because number one, I saved money. What? San Francisco versus living with parents in Chennai. Imagine that, right? Number two, so much peace was there for those 6 months that I was in India writing the book because I didn't have to worry about laundry or food or taxes or rent. I was with my parents. So I could just focus on, like literally I would wake up, go run, go to this small space to write the book, come back home, go to sleep. That was my day.
Yeah. And
number three, I actually got to reconnect with my family after so many years. Thanks to US Immigration for that.
So 100% agree with life in India. At some point, I feel like I will move back. I don't know when. It's exactly those things, comfort of life. Like I have arguments with so many Americans about why I want to move back. And they're like, you don't want to do chores? And I'm like, I don't want to do chores. I want to spend time on what I think is worth spending time on. Whether that's just sitting with my family and doing nothing, whether that's reading a book, writing, whatever it is. But I don't want to have to spend time on stuff that I don't need to. And the disparity in what you need to be able to afford that here versus in India is very big, right?
Astronomical.
And I don't know when, at some point I'll move back. But it's funny to see the perspective of folks who are local here, who have never seen the other side of having that sort of help and support. So you're in India, you're writing the book, you're with your parents. How was the self-publishing journey different the second time around?
I didn't make a single dollar from Admitted, even today.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, number one, I couldn't make money on the visa anyway.
Yeah.
But number two, it wasn't meant for that.
Yeah.
So that was different. That was more of a labor of love. It took exactly 9 months to finish the book. So it really just felt like a passion project. Unshackled was different. The stakes were higher, as I said.
Yeah.
People were actually waiting to read this. We had a professional editor. I was co-authoring with a lawyer with 20 years of experience. So it just felt more professional this time.
Got it.
And I was doing it full-time versus Admitted, which was part-time. That was the main difference, I would say, is that the way I thought about Admitted versus Unshackled, it felt like with Admitted, I was just having fun with this little book that really I loved writing, but it was always a side project. With Unshackled, this was my main focus. Self-publishing journey, I actually thought of getting a publisher for Admitted first. I tried getting a few publishers. All of them said, it'll take us 6 months to review your manuscript. And I'm a very impatient person, which is both my strength and weakness. So I decided I can't wait that long. Unshackled, I thought about a publisher maybe, but I realized, you know what? I want to, once again, publish fast.
Yeah.
And after selling a few thousand copies, I can always get a publisher to take it under their wing and sell the copyrights. So let's just do it my way first and then sell it to a publisher, which I'm still planning to do, by the way, because actually I think both the books now need to not be under my wing anymore. And I want to give it to a publisher who can take it forward and spread the word better than I ever could with just my resources.
Makes sense. So you mentioned that marketing is a really important factor, skill, necessity when doing self-publishing.
Absolutely.
Is that something that comes naturally to you? Was it difficult understanding the channels, setting it up, doing all the marketing needed for Unshackled? What did those pieces look like?
I just realized no one in my life has asked me this specific question. Does marketing come naturally to you? People either assume that it does or they don't ask me the question at all. Excellent question. I'm thinking, does it come naturally? I've been told by other people that I am a good marketer. So I would say it comes a little naturally. Was it hard to do marketing? Okay, it wasn't hard in the sense of it wasn't like an intellectual problem that was hard to solve. We all know what marketing is. This is marketing, right? I knew what marketing channels I had to tackle and target to reach the audience. That wasn't the hard part. Actually doing it with enthusiasm
100%.
Was incredibly hard. I remember even the store. I spent the last 3 months working to set up this Unshackled campus tour where we went to 15 universities. We're still going on the tour. We have a few more stops. The last 3 months, so much marketing. But actually being on the tour has been fantastic. I loved visiting every single university and talking to students. But the lead up to this, I don't think of it as, oh God, anymore. I think of it as, it's part of my job. I want to do everything with enthusiasm. And I know why I'm doing it. Like there is a reason for doing this work.
It's concerted effort and like curated effort versus let me just try a bunch of things, right? So it's also...
Exactly. There's a clear end goal to all of this. There's a mountaintop that you're looking at and you know you're going to reach it if you just keep going. That's one thing I think the last few months taught me versus the first few months of Unshackled where I did a lot of marketing. And I think it was a bit more abstract back then. I wasn't really clear what I was doing, but I knew I wanted to write something on this topic. I still, despite coming to terms with marketing, I want to get a publisher for my third book. I already have an idea of something of what I want to write about. And I told myself, even if it takes an extra year, it's okay. Get a publisher this time.
And this is my naivety of knowing nothing about publishing books. Does getting a publisher solve some of those marketing challenges for you? Do they take that on, or?
Yeah, great question, actually. Or were you
No,
going to say something?
or so like in some cases when you get a service, they're like, we'll do everything for you, but you still have to go and do the marketing yourself, right? Like,
Yeah.
so like, I don't know how publishing works. I was just curious.
I don't either very much. I know a little bit about it, but I would say no, just getting a publisher does not mean you're going to sell 1 million copies. Only for the rarest of writers like Atomic Habits or Tim Ferriss, it could happen. Because publishers want to put all their money behind people who already have a following. Because, that's how they win as well. I haven't thought through this enough to answer this question, but I'll just say that I want to get a publisher to take care of all the logistics, first of all. Because I think the logistics is probably the worst use of my time.
100%.
I know how to do it. I don't want to do it. So I would like for someone who's good at that to take care of that. I definitely think I'm still going to have to do marketing from my side. That's never going to stop. But it would be great if I had a team of people whose like sole focus in exchange for giving money to them is to figure out all the places where, for example, I could go and be on a podcast. They get the podcast, I go and present myself there. Or they get a speaking engagement, I can go and do it. So just the operational work.
Makes sense.
Like, you won't believe this Unshackled campus tour. You would think there was a team behind this. It was me and it was Narayan, who you met right now.
Yeah.
Just the two of us working part-time for 3 months. Just that. Like, we did every single operations on this. It's exhausting. And I realized at least those parts I can definitely offboard to someone else the next time around. But I have a friend of mine, Elizabeth, who published her book on like neurohacking through Hachette, which is this French publisher, very big publisher. I asked her, it's awesome. Did they help you sell copies? She gave a mixed answer. She said, yes and no. Like, they got me all the media attention, interviews and everything. But no, it didn't translate to selling copies really. And so I realized that's why I focus on LinkedIn and Instagram still. You briefly mentioned in the beginning that I have some following there. I want to keep investing time into social media and growing that because I realize I'm in a job where I have to do the selling in some way. I have to build the distribution and keep doing that for my life. And not for a moment, I feel, oh God, I have to do this. Because social media, especially LinkedIn, has been the single most useful tool for meeting interesting people. You probably met me in some way because of LinkedIn, because Steven introduced us both. Rajesh introduced me and Steven. In some ways or form, okay, in this case, LinkedIn wasn't involved.
LinkedIn was because I only knew you existed because I saw one of your H1B posts
go
viral, right? And that was why I'm like, oh, okay, I know who Soundarya is. And then we were talking to Steven. I mentioned, hey, I'm going to SF. Can you connect me to interesting folks? Because he recently went on a trip.
See?
And then that's how he made the connection.
And because these days we have something called a 0th impression. Not a first impression. Because literally everyone can be Googled and you can see something about them,
100%.
right? So you want to be able to control that 0th impression to some extent.
So self-publish, you're in India. Did you launch the book from India and sort of self-publish it from India, or were you in the States at that point? Because I know you applied for O1A. So I wanted to understand that part of the decision-making process. Why go O1A and how did the book help in getting that?
Why go O1A? Sometimes you keep your sights on a certain goal for so long that you forget the initial reason you wanted the goal. So I will say a part of it was that I had been wanting to get the O1 for so long for practical purposes. The O1, currently I'm the 100% owner of a company that I incorporated, through which I got the O1 as a CEO and founder. So it does let me work on what I want full-time in America. So obviously it's also a very real need that I had.
So you mentioned in America, right? So initially you mentioned you wanted the freedom to work on what you wanted to work and build on. And my understanding is the 9 months you were in India, you had the freedom.
Absolutely.
And so why do O1? And you mentioned why, but why come back to the States? Is it because of the mission and what you're working on? Or what sort of, because you had the freedom you wanted. So I'm just trying to. get that.
When I left to go back to India, all of my stuff was still in the US. My car was in the US. I knew at some point I wanted to come back. I didn't know when, but I did want to come back. I have people here.
Makes sense.
I have very, very close friends and people here. So it's not that I was abandoning America forever. I definitely wanted to come back. And I don't think there's another country on earth where you can make as much money as America if you know what you want to do.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to come back to America at some point. But the biggest shift was America was not this magical destination where I wanted to settle down anymore. It is not anymore for me. Now I think of America as in some way a product. You know, they've marketed the country so well and so many people want to come there that it is a product.
Right in the wave.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is a means to an end.
Yeah.
If you want to promote yourself, if you want to meet incredibly talented people, if you want to grow fast, come to America, do that, and then leave and go back to wherever you want to. That's how I think of it right now. After having gone through an incredibly long process, I want to help other immigrants who are going through this themselves. I was not at all expecting to set up Unshackled.club as an online community for O1, EB1 recipients or aspirants. It happened along the way after I got emails from over 100 people telling me, how do I start? Can you tell me something? Can you give me some guidance? That happened along the way.
So the reason was you got the freedom you wanted, right? And so why come back to the States?
Yeah.
And why go through that journey? Because it's not the easiest process, right? Going through an O1 application is a tedious process, takes a lot of mind, effort and everything, right? Even if you have the basics down. But sort of wanted to understand, and you briefly answered that you had a life here, you had friends here, you had community here. And
also, as I said, this is a great country to grow yourself.
Yeah.
You asked me, how did Unshackled help in getting the O1? So my O1 petition was 750 pages long. It is a very long petition for a lot of people. Unshackled was a very small part of it, actually. Like you would think it would be the biggest thing, but it wasn't. I positioned myself. I told that I am one of the experts in the field of talent mobility. I've written 2 books on this topic. I have published dozens of articles. I got a grant from a foundation to work on this project. I got several media articles around this. So there's a bunch of things I had around helping talented people cross borders. Something that I truly believe in. Unshackled was a part of that. But we also in some ways wanted to be careful because in some ways Unshackled is criticizing the immigration system in the US. You don't want that to be the first sentence in the petition saying, you guys are not doing a very good job. You need to change your laws.
Yeah.
Now give me the O1.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a good petition. And that's not even what I wanted to do. I think Unshackled incredibly helped in getting the O1 eventually, but it wasn't the only thing because I included evidence from the last 8 years of my life, not just last 2 years.
Makes sense. So you get O1A, you come back to the States. What happened that pushed you to start Unshackled.club? And you mentioned hundreds of emails. So how do you translate that into, let me start a community? Because I want to say you're a writer at heart and that's where
Absolutely.
your passion lies, right? Why go the Unshackled.club route?
Okay, so it wasn't after I got the O1. That's not entirely accurate because when we did the crowdfunding campaign, one of the tiers on Kickstarter was a lifetime membership to the community.
Got it.
So even then I had an idea that I would create some community.
Got it.
I've built communities since I was young in different ways. In undergrad, I started a social club at NIT Trichy. I have started several Slack workspaces for different purposes over the years. My Admitted book had a community. So it wasn't new for me. The mechanics of what benefits to offer was an ever-changing process. Even today, we keep thinking about what else can we do. I had to look up a lot of other communities. Like there is a community called Nest Labs for neuroscience enthusiasts. There is Leap.club, community of professional women in India. I looked at other communities, well-performing ones, saw what they had, and then we thought about what benefits can we put together. And it is a membership community, not a free one. People have to pay to join and to pay to continue being a part of it. Because at the end of the day, I also realized now this is my full-time job. This is a business and you want it to sustain after you die as well, hopefully. And that cannot happen if it's free forever. Technically, I could keep getting grants from foundations every single year, but that doesn't seem it seems very precarious to me to do that.
Also not a scalable or reliable.
Not scalable. Yeah. So it wasn't my cup of tea. I got it once. Actually, we're in the process of getting another grant to build an AI tool, side discussion. But that's how the community started. We launched it in August of 2023 last year. And now we have over 400 members who are a part of it. It is very focused, right? It's not like a community of, oh, just come and learn about neuroscience or there's a place for that. But ours is a very focused community on come here are the resources, here are the mentors and connections. Use this to get your talent visa in America. Specifically an O1, EB1 or EB2 national interest waiver.
Makes sense. And I think one thing that's very important in this O1 journey, this small sidetrack, is if you're sure you want to go that route, and the earlier you realize, the better you can document your journey up until the point of when you want to apply. Because I think one thing that people get wrong is everything matters. Every public mention matters. Every appearance, meetup, whatever, hackathon, right? Everything will have some weightage. But if you don't keep track, if you don't have some sort of log of why you're a good fit, it will hurt you down the line, right? So
I have to just repeat what you said because thank you for saying this. Every single thing matters in the O1. Even a small mention in a newspaper from 10 years ago could be used in the petition. For people watching this, please go back and document everything that you've done so far. Every email, every invitation letter you got, capture a screenshot or PDF and then save it somewhere. And I'm saying this because when I was putting together my O1A petition last year, I went back to look at all my media appearances. 3 of them had been taken down. 3 of them, and one of them was a very good mention. And they just took it down. So if I just captured a PDF or a screenshot, I could have used that.
Yeah. So you start Unshackled.club. You start engaging with the community. Was that a smooth journey, a smooth transition? Or were there hiccups along the way? Because it's now something parallel. You've done communities, but there's, I want to say, different stakes here than sort of
Absolutely.
Something you started in undergrad, right?
I'm still figuring out the question of sales. It's not my cup of tea. I think I've gotten better at it in the last year. But how do you scale and sell so that more and more members get to know about it and actually join? And obviously, after they join, how do you provide value so that they feel like my money, I got it 5 times back?
Yeah. And repeated value.
And repeated value.
O1 could be a 2, 3, 4 year process, right? So you want them to be a part of the community.
Actually, I'll tell you, the biggest problem I'm currently facing is hiring. I'm going to be public about this in the next 2 weeks or a few weeks anyway, so I might as well just say it.
And this will come out in 3, 4 weeks. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So I'm a writer at heart. You've said it twice on this podcast. I know that. And while building Unshackled.club has been a fantastic experience, I realize I'm not the best person to scale it anymore. Because my heart keeps going towards writing.
Yeah.
And I have a project in mind that I want to work on as a 3rd book. And so soon I'll be publishing a long post on how I'm beginning to take a step back from specifically Unshackled.club and building this company forward. And I want to focus on writing more, which is the whole reason I quit my job. So I'm going to make a public statement. I'm going to put it out there across all channels. And the tens of thousands who care to follow my work, hopefully I'll find a few people who are interested in taking over after me. Because really I'm looking for someone who can come in, whose passion it is to take something from 1 to 10. I've done the 0 to 1 right now. I've built something here. I don't think I'm the best person for 1 to N anymore. And I want someone who wants to do that. And so I think that's the biggest problem. Once this tour ends with Unshackled, I want to just focus on that.
Makes sense. I think it takes a lot of maturity to realize you said 0 to 1. You said you've done 0 to 1 and you're not the right person 1 to 10. I feel like a lot of early stage startups probably don't get the growth they need because the leader, founder, co-founder, whoever is a 0 to 1 person or is a 1 to 10 person and they're not able to do 0 to 1 or they're a 10 to 100 person.
Yeah.
And there's very few people, and like I think Zuckerberg's the only example I can think of off the top of my head who's done like the 0 to 1,000. I don't know a lot of other founders who have successfully done every stage of this. You can be good at 2. I don't think you could be good at 3 or 4 because they're very different skill sets, very different problems. I think it takes a lot of maturity for a founder to realize and understand that, hey, I like the 0 to 1, but I can't do the 1 to 10. And maybe you can do the 0 to 1 again and do it 3-4 times, but it's going to be a struggle getting the 1 to 10. And I think understanding that is a good space to be in, is like, hey, I'm not the right person. Let me find someone who's a better fit.
I'm really happy to hear that. And I'm glad you think that way, because I know I'm going to get some pushback, and I already have been getting it from some people who would tell that you built something and now you're leaving it, you're abandoning it, and it's going to fall down if you abandon it. Anyways, I have a long answer to that, but I think short answer is I don't want to abandon it. Number one, I did that with Admitted in some ways. With Admitted, one of my friends keeps telling me, you could have built a company there, study abroad. Like millions of students do that every year. You could have done something there. You could have made money with that. My strength and weakness, as I said, is some sort of impatience. I'm very fast at going 0 to 1. I get pretty distant after that because I have to go work on the other 0 to 1 next. And so I don't want to do that mistake this time. I want to make sure that Unshackled is a baby. You want to make sure you're giving it to the right person to nurture it now. And I will always be involved in still an advisory capacity, right? I don't think you're ever completely off. And I want to be involved. But I think the daily operations, the daily management, the scaling, brainstorming, that, as you said, I've realized I'm not the best person.
Some folks I follow, I think, refer to this as more a chairman position where your job is to make sure the right CEO, CPO, CTO, whatever. And if they leave, it's again your job to find the next CEO, operator, whoever the builder is. But you're always in that capacity of, it is still your company. It is still your idea, your vision. You just have someone else executing and operating on that. Nice. A couple quick questions I like to ask every guest at the end. So what is your support system? What would you say is your support system?
In terms of people?
Whatever. It could be people, resources, therapists, like it doesn't matter. It could be anything.
Okay. In terms of people, there's family back home. Mom, dad, brother, sister-in-law, niece, grandfather. In terms of blood-related family, I have Rajesh, who I've talked about a lot. I have a few very close friends across the world who I very much love. In some ways, also the people online. I'm fortunate that there's people on these social media platforms who I've, even if I've never met them, like we support each other. Like other creators, and we support each other. So I think that's the people support system. In terms of like an inanimate support system, journaling has been excellent in terms of coping. I used to meet a therapist. I don't right now. I probably should soon. And running. I ran a lot the last month before the tour started. I want to get back to it next week when I get back home. So that is in terms of self-care support system.
Nice. What's your startup tech stack? What's the tools you use to manage Unshackled.club you're writing?
Circle.so for our community platform. ConvertKit for our email marketing. Zapier for connecting all of our tools. We do a lot of automation there. Notion for all of our companies, planning, organization, brainstorming. AudioPen I use personally for voice journaling. Roam Research for note-taking personally. And Rebrandly, which I've come to realize is an excellent tool for having link redirection. And finally, Webflow for building our website.
Okay, nice. What are 3 resources that you would recommend to folks listening? Whether they're immigrants, early stage founders, and these could be any kind of resources. Books, blogs, podcasts, tools.
Immigrant founders?
In general. So I want to say most of the folks listening are people building, operating, or early in the journey of building a company. And if you want to be more niche for immigrant, that's also fine.
Great question. 3 resources for them. I'm trying to think of what newsletter I've had a lot of value from. Great subreddits. Like finding the right subreddit has been very, very useful for me. I follow a few on immigration itself and on founders. That's been very helpful. Number 2 would be, it's a very small thing, but I use a Product Hunt Chrome extension wherein every time I open my Chrome, the first thing I see is what's the new product that's come up today. Sometimes I go there and see what the product is about. That's been really helpful. And number 3 would be, people don't have to read my book. But if someone who's an immigrant founder who's listening to this must understand that they can actually build their company on 8 different visas in the US. They don't have to have a green card for that. And O1 is not the only visa out there. So I would highly recommend going and understanding how you can build a company on O1, H1B, B1, L1, H4, EAD, IEP, and so on. And we cover all of this in Unshackled in each chapter. So I would just say, like, go read about that somewhere.
And I have a segment where I ask every guest a question for a future guest, and I'll ask you the same. So your question is, how are you stepping out of your comfort zone and using it as a strength?
Oh, those are 2 very different questions. Okay. How are you stepping out of your comfort zone? Me deciding to take a step back from Unshackled right now is me stepping out of my comfort zone. Because the comfort zone is, I know how we can keep going with this. Even though I'm not the best person to scale, I know how we could scale this. So me deciding I don't want to do that is stepping out of my comfort zone. The second question was?
So how are you using that to your strength?
How are you using it to your strength? Hopefully by being very honest and public about this from the beginning and not just announcing 6 months later that I'm done leaving. I'm hoping that this open vulnerability is a source of strength. And it has been for me for the last several years, like being open about what's happening in my life and what's going through my mind. So
I like it. What's one question you have for a future guest?
Right.
And I don't know who the guest could be anyone, a founder, a PM, a investor. So
I've been thinking about work-life balance, work-life integration a lot lately. So maybe a question would be, do you think of your life as a work-life balance or a work-life integration? And if it's the latter, if it's work-life integration, how do you draw boundaries?
Sweet. Where can folks listening find you? Anything you want to plug? Can you say anything about your third book, or is that all hush-hush right now?
No, it's not. So if anyone has read Tuesdays with Morrie, if you've heard of it, so it was published in 1999. It is a beautiful slice of life memoir that a student writes on his teacher.
Got it.
Who is dying of ALS and is in the last 6 months of his life. I read that 2.5 years ago, around the same time that I met Rajesh, who I've talked about on the podcast, who is more than a mentor at this point. He's more of a father figure. Rajesh has made me happier, more confident, and more generous and giving than anyone in my life. And he's changed me for the better. And I think the relationship that he and I have is extremely special, and I've rarely seen that outside. I want to write a book like Tuesdays with Morrie, with Rajesh, where we get to explore these philosophical questions around what makes a happy and meaningful life, but set in the context of a conversational book where I get to learn from his experiences and I get to share that with the world. Right. It's a very abstract concept, as you can hear it. But I know there is something here. It's an idea that's possessed me, and I can't let go of it until I figure it out. So that's my third book, roughly. Don't have a name. Where people can find me, I'm most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So LinkedIn, my name is Soundarya Balasubramani.
And we'll link everything, so don't worry about it.
Oh, great. Yeah. LinkedIn, Instagram. Email is hi@Unshackled or hi@CuriousMaverick.com, my blog. Last but not least, for anyone who's listening who is an immigrant themselves or want to be an immigrant in America, check Unshackled.club, Unshackled.club, and we have everything over there.
Sweet. But thank you for coming on. I know you had a tight schedule in Austin, but look forward to getting this episode out.
I can't wait for this because of all the podcasts that I've been on, this has been the highest quality production and excellent questions.
Thank you. But thanks for coming on. Thanks for tuning into Funds and Founders. If you're a local Austin founder, a venture capitalist, or just someone who's building and in the middle of their journey and would like to be featured on an upcoming episode, submit your guest pitch to abhinavsinha.podcast@gmail.com. If you have a founder-specific event you'd like to promote on the podcast, you can also reach out to me. If you want to continue to get support through your founder journey, hit the follow button and I'll see you in the next episode.